Hi, my name's Stephen Hand from Archery Supplies. This customer wrote to us and said these limbs are twisted. Now I'll go through the basis. Now these limbs are a fiberglass foam limb, and in my lifetime of selling limbs, which is 30 years, I have never seen a twisted foam core limb. In fact, twisted limbs are extremely rare. I'm going to say they were more common back in the old days when you had wood and fiberglass, and it was like a quality issue, but less common today. So literally, even the wood core limbs today, it's very, very rare to see one twisted. So the customer gets the limbs, fits them to his bow, and he says the string did not line up in the grooves, okay, on the top limb. So he said he spoke to the club coaches, he tried different limbs in his bow and all the limbs aligned. So he tried other limbs in his bow and they all aligned, but this top limb did not. So his conclusion was the limb was twisted. Now we wrote back and we said it's probably the alignment of the bow, because you can change the alignment of your limb in a bow, is probably the reason for it. So he sent back the limbs. Now these are the limbs fitted to a new riser. You can see they're running exactly straight down the middle, and hopefully I can do the whole thing where they're aligned. Anyway, they're all aligned, they're running straight down the middle. So the question is, why in this bow is it aligned but not in his? Now there's several reasons for it, and I suppose I'm going to go into them and let's discuss it. So I have seen this before. So I'm going to say I've seen it before. I had one guy with same limbs, and he came in and he said, look, they wouldn't come down the center of the limb. So when he shot, the string would be on one side of the limb. So I said, well, bring it all in. Now it's no use just bringing the limbs in, okay? Because I'm going to tell you there's nothing wrong with these limbs, okay? And then you're not going to be happy with my conclusion. So I said, look, bring in everything, bring in the riser, bring in your arrows, and let's go and have a look. Okay, so he brought in his bow, not these limbs, but he brought in his bow and arrows. And he shoots for me, and absolutely the string comes down one side of the limb. Okay? So I look at the bow, and I look at the way the arrow flies, and the arrow's not flying very well. And I looked at the guy's release. So what happens when the guy releases, he pulls his hand out to the side, and as a result, the arrow's kicking when it shoots. So I said, look, can I shoot your bow? So I shoot his bow for him. And of course, the limb comes straight down the center of the alignment. Okay? So I shoot the arrow. I shoot like 24 arrows for him. The arrows are straight down the center of alignment. So I'm like, look, you can see it's not the limb. It's to do with you and the way you're shooting and the bow setup. So I said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to concentrate on your shooting form and make you have good shots. So we concentrated on this hand not leaving his face and getting a clean shot. Now, all his clean shots, the string came straight down the middle of the line of the limb. But when he pulled his hand away, the limb wouldn't track down the center. Now, it's more pronounced on a light poundage bow, and it can occur if their bow's not tuned correctly. Okay? So if you don't have the correct arrows, the string won't come down the center of the line, because when the arrow is flying, it's not flying correctly, and hence it won't come down the center of the line of the limb. So I'm going to say, if you think your limbs are twisted, put the top limb on the bottom and the bottom limb on the top, because if it was the top limb, then when you fit it down the bottom, it would still be that limb, okay? But if it's now the top again, it's probably more to do with a seating issue, and you've got adjustment up here. But if you have problems, you're always best to send everything back. Send the riser back, send the limbs back, send the string back, send the arrows back, because then you can look at it and say, what is the problem? Okay? Now, from a customer's perspective, he's obviously gone, well, I've gone to 2 coaches and I've gone to other people, and this doesn't occur with other people's limbs. Now, there could be lots of reasons for this. The other limbs might be heavier, they might be seating better, so there could be lots of reasons that another limb will fit and these ones don't. But without getting the whole bow back, without this is where we're up to. We're up to when I fit the limb, you can see it's perfect. We shoot the bow, it's perfect. Now, in fact, when I fitted these limbs to another bow, so originally we fitted them to a motive riser, which is a metal riser, the bottom limb didn't line up. So he had a problem with the top limb, and we're thinking, well, maybe it's because he switched them around. But then instead of us aligning the limbs, we just grabbed another riser and just fitted them, and they were perfect. So it's more to do with the alignment of the bow. So it could be a seating issue or just the thing here that needs adjusting. Most times the bows are spot on straight out of the factory. And in all the times I've fitted bows, they've always been spot on straight out of the factory. So just bear it in mind when you're buying foam limbs, which are fiberglass, very, very rare that they'll ever be twisted. I haven't seen one being twisted, not to say yours isn't. But if you think it's twisted, fit it down the bottom, then you can fit it back up the top to see if that's the problem. If it occurs when you're shooting, you want to see how the arrow is shooting out the bow, so you want to look at tuning, paper tuning and bare shaft tuning to make sure the arrow is coming out straight. And if the arrow is kicking out the bow, it's likely that this is not going to come through straight. Okay, so you've got to get, for this to come through straight, the bow needs to be shooting straight. And I'm going to say, as you shoot higher poundage limbs, the problems you have with your release are going to be less of an issue, because that string is pulling out of your hand so much better, so much harder, that the arrow flies straighter. Alright, so with me, I'm going to have to go back to a light poundage set of limbs when I start back shooting. So I expect my groups are going to be significantly worse. I expect my release that I shoot is going to be a lot more sensitive to the way I shoot, so I'm going to expect a lot more bad shots than when I shoot 56 pounds. So when I go back to shooting, I'm going to probably start at about 16 pounds. I expect a lot of issues with my shooting. I might even expect the string not to be down the line of the limbs. So I'm going to do videos on all that, on building back up and building up a beginner bow when I'm strong enough, but they'll be in a few weeks that I'll be gradually building up the thing. And I'll be doing the same with a compound bow. So I expect that my scores with a compound bow at light poundage to be significantly less than they were with my 60-pound bow. But there's a point where their poundage won't make much difference. So like going from a 16-pound limb to a 30-pound limb, there'll be significant difference, and there'll be significant difference going from the 30 to a 40-pound limb. But from going to 40 to 44, probably not much difference. So anyway, I'm Stephen Hand from Archery Supplies. Summary is, if you think you've got twisted limbs, fit them to top to bottom to see if it is, because it might just be a fitting issue. And when you're returning stuff, return the whole lot. So that way the person can look at it and identify what the problem is. Because at the moment, we look at it and go, well, the limb's all right, limb's fine. So what do we do now? Customer still has a problem, and the problem's not going to be fixed. So that's where we're up to. I'm Stephen Hand from Archery Supplies. Thanks for watching.